Hi, how's everyone out there doing? This is Amy Hamilton, author of The Project Manager, Life is a Project, and I am so excited today to be here with Oliver Lehmann. Oliver is an esteemed coach, trainer. He is extraordinarily actively involved in the project management community, and I have his two books with me today. The first one that we are going to be discussing is called Situational Project Management. There's a little bit of a glare. The Dynamics of Success and Failure in Projects. And Oliver brings some great insight into how you can do everything exactly the same way in a project, but get extraordinarily different results. So that kind of textbook, this is what we're going to do, doesn't always work. Oliver, do you want to share some more thoughts on your book on situational project management?
Yeah, the thing that drove me to write this book by that time, 5 years ago, was an observation, just as you said it. The same practice that is successful in one moment may fail in another one. I saw this in my projects, and I observed this in many other situations. And by the time, somehow there was a hype coming up. It was there before, but it really turned into a hype now. And this was, everyone was talking about best practices. So if you have a best practice, you can run every project, yeah. And if you know the best practice, you don't have to learn anything anymore because you already have the best practice, yeah. Like a philosopher's stone, like a silver bullet, yeah. And my understanding of project management is that we don't have that we have to be very situational, and that the same practice that can be successful in one moment may fail in another one. Actually, I have been with PMI now for more than 20 years, and in the PMBOK guide, we have statements on that too. But what I was missing was some active help. The question, if you have a certain type of project, actually, first of all, what is a type of project? What types of projects do we have? But then the next question is, if you have a certain type of project, what kind of behavior should you have? What kind of methods should you apply, and so on? What practices are relevant? And the other thing I noticed that it can change during the course of the project. The same thing that is good in one moment in a project, the same practice, the same behavior, method, tools, and so on, may fail in another one. Mm-hmm. So give people help to select practices and say, this is a moment to use this practice, and this is another moment where I will need another practice.
I think that's really interesting about that. And Oliver, you had mentioned that you're very busy in the PMI chat, and how project management has actually changed recently. And before we started this conversation, we were talking about how the new PMBOK has come out, and that creates changes as well. So even what we did before might not be a best practice underneath the new guidance. What are your thoughts on that?
This openness to different practices, I think, has been in the PMBOK guide all the time. It said it's not best practice, it is good practice for most projects, most of the time. And that's, I think, a very good statement, good practice that is suitable for certain moments. So this hasn't changed. I see the reason why they restarted the PMBOK guide. It got larger and larger, and the book got thicker and heavier, and at one point in time, someone said, we cannot go on like that. It will be impossible to develop it and read it. Another thing that went up was the number of inconsistencies in the book. Hundreds of people were writing on that. So these people created inconsistencies in the book. And it was, the thicker it gets and the more volume you have in it and the more topics you have in it, the harder it gets to avoid these internal inconsistencies. So someone said we need a new start. Some people love this start, some may not so much love this start, but the idea was to start again at scratch and with something new, and that's where we are at the moment. It's not in contradiction to the old PMBOK guide, but it has different priorities and different focus areas it's looking at. Yeah.
Okay, so if you were a project manager, brand new, what do you think that you could get out of reading the Situational Project Manager? What are like the kind of 2 or 3 big takeaways that you think you would need just kind of starting out to understand the difference between, like you said, you've been trained up, you're a project manager, you've got the formula, but what now? You're new, you're just kind of out there starting.
Actually, the audience is not the beginner. The audience is someone who has, for the book, is someone who has some experience and can relate to the things that are in the book. It's like cooking. When you start cooking, when you are young and stand the first times in the kitchen, what you need is cooking recipes, and you will follow recipes, and some will be successful, some will not be successful. In cooking, you will mature over time. And the better you get, the more you become rather the person to write cooking recipes than to follow cooking recipes. Yeah. So I was rather writing for those people who do not follow just cooking recipes, but either they are very selective and they can adjust cooking recipes, or really they would write their own ones. So I think it's not really written for the beginner. For the beginner, there's one thing I can always say: be careful about yourself. Project management is a very dangerous field, and young people sometimes get burned in project management. They get burned out. They get destroyed. They're not treated the way they should be treated, with respect and allowing them to learn. Yeah, they are thrown in the cold water, and the water can be very, very cold for them.
I really like your cooking analogy with that. That was I think something people can relate to all over the world. And speaking of being all over the world, I'm here in Arlington, Virginia, in the United States. And Oliver, can you share with the audience where you're at?
I'm in Munich, Bavaria, Germany. So here it's 6:30. Yeah, my family is already at dinner, and yes.
And over here it's 12:30, so midday. I actually just ate lunch before we got on the chat. And one of the things I'd be very interested in from the audience members is where are you located at and what type of project management you're in. So I see we have quite a few viewers out there if you want to start putting that in the comments. And I put how to access Oliver's first book into the comments. Oliver, you have a great story in there that's personally related to where I used to live in Stuttgart, Germany. And that has to do with the train stations. And you take two projects, very similar, and they have vastly different outcomes. And I will let you go ahead and share the details of that story, because I think there's a lot of information to be gained from that.
That's an interesting thing. I agree. We have two relatively new central stations in Germany. One is in Berlin, which is completely new. The other one is at the moment in under construction, and that's Stuttgart, where an existing train station, the rails are turned by 90 degrees. You lived there long enough. You remember all these discussions.
Oh, yeah.
So Stuttgart is not a place you don't know. And I was born in Stuttgart, by the way. Yeah, that's my original hometown. I'm Swabian. So, and the interesting thing is, Berlin Central Station to me is one of the greatest success stories in Germany. I don't think that there is something like naked success. In every success, you will find some elements of failure as well. So it has them as well. But the overall thing, it's a wonderful station, very impressive. It's very practical. It's very easy to find your way when you have to change trains there. So it's very, very good. The other story is Stuttgart 21, where they built a train station. And in, I think, 2011, the project ran into deep crisis. People were on the streets. They stopped the project for, I think it was 9 or 10 months, something like that, which means there's no progress, but there is still cost running. So this also, it's not only just exceeding deadlines and running over schedule, it's also running over budget. So, and the interesting thing is, if you look at those two projects, a lot of things are similar or are the same. The one thing that is similar is it's the same environment. It's a construction project in the environment of railway industry. Yeah? It's a central station and so on. So many commonalities. And the most interesting commonality is it was the same project manager who drove Berlin into crisis. Yeah. Who drove Stuttgart into crisis, and he was successful in Berlin. So the question was really, how could that happen? And I made some research with a group of friends of mine. They are all experts in project management. In total, over 300 years of experience in project management. And this is not even including me. This is just those who helped me. And we developed a typology of projects. We asked, what are the things that make a project successful, and a seemingly similar project may fail with the same approach, with the same practice. So we developed a typology where we said there are different types of projects, and one of them explains Stuttgart and Berlin very well, and that's the differentiation between a greenfield project and a brownfield project. These two are literally greenfield and brownfield. Sometimes I use it as a metaphor, but in this case, Berlin was greenfield. Berlin was built on the area where the former Berlin Wall had been, and it was all free, and they didn't have to look too much about people living there. There was no one living there, And the project manager followed a philosophy: keep people out of the project. He told his team, his staff, the environment is hostile. Keep it out of the project. I know it from his employees, his team members, because I had them in my class. I never met him personally, unfortunately. And this was the best approach for Berlin. It kept all the disruptive factors out so he could build his central station there. In Stuttgart, the same approach led into difficulties, because in Stuttgart, the situation was that people were living around. It's a very difficult geological area. There's something around, it's called Gipskörper. Gipskörper is some kind of material. If you make it wet, if we bring water in, it can start swelling. And if you have houses on top, they can break apart. And that really happened already in some places, that houses got damaged over the construction place. And these people were afraid for their houses. And I think these stakeholders have a right to talk to the project manager and ask the project manager, what are you going to do to protect our houses? I also have an own house, and I would do precisely the same. Yes, I want to protect the home of my family. I think that's a justified requirement. And he said, no, hostile, we don't talk with you. No one will talk with you. And then they came back, and stakeholders rejected when they come back. They don't come back alone. They bring friends with them, tree huggers. And I just learned this word, by the way, tree huggers and journalists, the press, of course, and lawyers and so on. And they brought the project to a halt, and the project couldn't go on for several months. So, and it was the same approach, it was the same behavior, the same practices that were good practice in one project and bad practice in the other project. So the question is, what can we do to help people select the most appropriate practice? And in the book, we look at two things. One question is, can we do long-term predictive approaches? Can we apply them? Or do we need to do short-term approaches? We know them as agile methods, or somewhere in between. And the other thing is, what leadership behavior, achieving styles do you have to bring are favored or are not favored in certain projects? I think it's quite interesting what we found out in a group of 17 people.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And one of the mentions I want to give real quick is recently we had Elizabeth Heron on the show, and she just published her latest book. It's on stakeholder management, and definitely ties into what Oliver was just talking about on the importance of understanding your stakeholders. So either looking at Oliver's book on situational management, or even going out and looking at Elizabeth's book on stakeholder management, and great points that, as project managers, we learn, we develop, we grow. And it's interesting because when I look at my first book, The Project Manager Life is a Project, even when you look at projects in your life, and I look at one of the very personal ones we have, which is raising our children. Raising children, it might be very, very different to raise one child and another child, even though you're giving them that same foundation.
Absolutely. That's so true. That's so true. Yes. And when you have a partner, you also have to be different in your behavior. I'm now in my second marriage, and I sometimes ask myself whether my poor stakeholder management destroyed my first marriage because I was traveling too much. I love traveling. I was in projects. I was doing projects, automotive industry, yeah, which means you do a lot of traveling. And by that time, I may have destroyed my first marriage and my first family. So it could well be that in private life we do mistakes that we would not do in business and vice versa. Yeah, I think I did something wrong by the time. Yeah, I learned. And now in my second marriage, I'm a bit more careful now.
Well, you've definitely learned, and we learn a lot, Oliver, in our lives. And one of the things that is really important, and I always talk about it, is this concept of the most precious resource you have is your time, because you never get time back. And whether that's a work project, whether that's a project at home, and a lot of times you have to decide, where are you spending that time, and is it the right things that you're doing? And then, the quality and the cost come after that. So we've talked quite a bit about your first book on situational project management, but is there anything that I didn't ask you about your first book that you want to share with the audience right
now? There's, maybe you cannot show it directly because you would need to find it quickly. But there's one thing that I found very interesting. When we had this typology of projects, something really jumped into my mind. And this was the distinction between internal projects and customer projects. Internal projects, the organization does a project for own purposes. We develop a new product, new services. We do some organizational change, whatever it is. Yeah, we do something for our own benefit. But then we have another type of projects, and this other type of projects is customer projects. Some say customer-facing projects. I prefer just customer projects, where one organization works for the benefit of another organization and gets paid for that. And they also have project managers, and their project managers have a totally different task. They are running a profit center, and their job is, first of all, to bring money home with a project. If they don't bring money home, and if they don't bring it home timely, the contractor at one point in time will no more exist. Yeah, will go bankrupt. Yeah, will go insolvent. So, and this was for me personally the most effective outcome, the strongest outcome of my first book. That I thought no one is looking at that. No one is there to describe that. PMI does not. I tried to convince PMI, let us talk about this as well. These are also project managers. These are colleagues of us. These are potential customers of me as a trainer and students as well. And as I wasn't really successful in that, I started something on. And that's the other book you have. That was the beginning, Project Business Management. So the second book is a result of the first book.
So we're going to talk about that in just a second. I do want to send a quick shout out right now to Saeed and the entire administrative support team for the project management information channel. Really appreciate that they give us this platform. For those of you who might be new to watching this, the series right now that you're watching, we feature different authors who do project management books, and we've had authors from all over the world, from Germany, from the United States, from the UK. Next month, December, and let me just double check the date here, is December 11th. We're going to be having Michael Clayton. I'll be sending out a nice advertisement on that. We're going to have a whole lineup we're going to be doing next year, and we're going to split it into 2 different series. And I'm really hoping Oliver will come back on for these series. And one is going to be what we're doing now, focused on the books. But the other one is going to be focused on what we're calling successful projects. We have some great project managers who are going to be lined up, and they're going to be talking about projects that have been successes and how you can achieve that success in your projects. So thank you, Saeed, for having us. And I would like to talk now about Oliver's second book that he mentioned, Project Business Management. And this is really for those external facing projects, right, Oliver?
That's one part of it. We have actually, there are 2 aspects. That the other aspect I noticed much later, but the first aspect was these customer projects where projects are done as profit centers. And at one point in time, I noticed there is a second topic that is completely overlooked. And that's what I now call project supply networks. You can compare this with, say, automotive industry. That's my home industry, by the way. I was many years in automotive before I became a trainer. And in automotive industry, about 30 years ago, I was there when it started. I was there at the
Yeah, I
beginning.
think Munich is known for making a couple cars.
Yeah, of course. What I want to say is I was there when something changed in the automotive industry, dramatically changed. Before that time, what they had was something they called the extended workbench. Extended workbench means you have your organization, your factory, and most of the things that are done for this car are done inside the factory. From time to time, you need something from outside the factory, pistons or this or that. So you have this extended workbench where you buy this. And you had to, at that time, an engineer had to explain, had to justify when something was bought externally. Now, what was changing was that instead of having this as a special situation, they made this the normal situation. They said, we don't want to produce so much by ourselves. What we want to have is supply chains with many layers in tiers. They call it tiers. So you have a first tier supplier, second tier, third tier supplier, and so on. And this really developed into a well understood discipline. They have education for that. They have literature for that. They have certifications for that. They have software for that and portal solution, everything. It's well organized. And if you go to just around my corner, go to BMW or where you lived, Mercedes, if you go to them and talk with a supply chain manager, they can tell you accurately in 2 months' time on the 16th of January, the fourth tier supplier XYZ somewhere in the world will produce this and this and this and these numbers and so on, and it will go to the third tier supplier and so on, and there will be assembly and all the other things. And at that point in time, this will be here at our doors, ready for production in that number, in that quality, and so on. It is engineered to the maximum. Now, what we see in project management is precisely the same development for projects. We are no more doing it all in-house. We give it to contractors, and they may give it to subcontractors, and there may be sub-subcontractors, and so on. Precisely the same situation. Where is the education? Where is the literature? Where is everything else? Yeah, we don't have it. Software for that. We don't have it. It's not there. So that's the other side. It's the development of something similar to supply chain management. I call it a PSN management, project supply networks. It's not really chains. It's not that orderly, but we need to engineer it. We need to understand it. We want to know who is there, who is working for our project. Often the customer has no idea who's working in the project. It may be criminal organizations. It may be people doing slavery. Yeah? It may be your direct competitor. Yeah? You don't know it. They don't know it. And that's the strange situation. By the way, just these days now, we have one of the biggest successes of project business management. And that's the development, the last mile now of the new COVID vaccine that was developed by a German company for an American customer. So we have the same situation, a contractor and a customer, Pfizer, the customer. And Pfizer alone would not have been able to do it that fast. And the German company needed the customer to do the project at the same time. Yeah? So what we see is, and I think it's not just the two companies, there must be, I don't know, 50, 100, maybe more companies involved in that. A highly complex thing, definitively. And what we see is what project supply networks can achieve in record time. Yeah? So that's a good approach.
So, Oliver, you bring up some great points. And as somebody who's in IT and cybersecurity, what I can tell you is supply chain management is absolutely crucial because, as you mentioned, do you know the company behind it? And especially if you're going to be putting software and hardware into your networks and on your systems, do you know who made it? Do you know the security of it? And are you sure that those things aren't going to have back doors where people could put in ransomware, embezzle money, do these kinds of nefarious things on your networks, steal your intellectual property? So just supporting every industry, whether it's construction, car manufacturing, or into IT and cybersecurity, supply chain really is evolving, and people are starting to recognize the importance of it. One of the things on the project business management I thought a lot about myself is that when you do in-house projects, you kind of have job security. Like I'm working on a project, and when this project ends, I'm part of a team and I'll get like another in-house project. But a lot of times if you're doing a business project, and I'm going to bring up, you mentioned the train example, so we'll stick to kind of some of these things. When you're working in automotive manufacturing and you work for Mercedes, when that project ends and you get the next car, you work on that. But if you're working on a train station, when that train station's built, project managers and people are going to be looking for jobs. How do you recommend project managers balance closing out projects, but also having to go on and look for new employment?
If you are a self-employed project manager, that's indeed a huge problem. And I think it's getting even more difficult than as you describe it, because at the time when you should be looking for the new job and for the next project, this is probably just the time when your old project is in its hottest phase and when you have least time for that. And by the way, time is one of these resources. The other one is energy. Yeah, you're just done in the night. You cannot write applications and send out profiles and whatever you would do. Yeah, so that's really a tough situation sometimes. One thing you can do is there are professional agencies that you can use. Some use that and they are quite lucky with that. Others are not happy and are not lucky with them, and they have the agency and still have no business. So the other thing I think is having good networks. This is the moment when your strong and good network is helpful. And by the way, internal project managers can run into precisely the same problem. The moment when your project is finished may be the moment that you get fired. I just had a talk yesterday with a lady who just had precisely that. A project she was in due to COVID was cancelled. It wasn't her fault. She didn't, at least that's what she didn't do anything wrong, but they couldn't go on with the project. It was no more possible in the current situation. And she was told she has to look for another job. She has some notice period, and now she needs to use this notice period to find a new job. So even as an employee, you're not that much safer. You are somewhat safer, but not that much safer. Yeah,
I think that's a really good point, Oliver.
So I think you have to have networks. You need to know good people. Yeah, and you have to build them when things are going well. You don't build the network when you're in troubles. When you're in troubles, that's the time when you need it. But you have to build it the years before that. And there is no business case for networking. The moment that you know the value of a network is when you don't have it, and when the other one who is competing with you for the job has the better network. Then you know the value.
I'm going to agree with you, Oliver, but I'm going to put a slight twist on that. The other thing in the value of your network is, for instance, right now. And I have been able to leverage knowing you, Peter Taylor, Elizabeth, who we've had on the show, Mike, who's coming up on the show. You mentioned we're going to try to bring Olivia on. And part of having a really strong network is that you have people that you can connect with at all times. And also the importance of being able to go to another project manager and I really respect you and your wisdom. And I can say, hey, Oliver, I'm really thinking about this aspect of project management. What do you think? And I think your network to run those ideas off of. And I know that we talked a lot as you were developing some of your books, especially when you were going into this external customer facing, business project management versus the internal project management. So I think there's a lot of value in your network as you develop ideas and you grow as a project manager and you go from following the recipe to making that recipe.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think each project is a sequence of learning processes. You learn every day something new in your project. Some of the things that you learn are valuable for the next hour or so. You need them for the next hour to make decision also. Some things are important for the rest of the project. And a lot of those things are valuable for the rest of your life. And one of the other things why networks are so important, we can exchange that. We have a situation, we have the ability to exchange these learning things, these learned things, these learned lessons that we learned in our projects with others, and can tell them, this is what I found there, this is what I observed there, and so on. And we can exchange them, and we can get other opinions to them. We can learn so much out of that. Yeah. So yes, of course, the network is not just for job search, but I think that's the most critical moment when you are looking for a job. That's the most critical moment when the value of the network becomes obvious. Yeah. But it has many more values, of course. Yeah.
So I think that's a good point, Oliver, is the network. And then we as project managers, we're always retraining and reskilling. I have your website scrolling across the bottom at oliverlehmann.com. Can you share a little bit about what you could find on your website and what you offer in your training opportunities?
What I'm offering is, in essence, three things now. One thing is to introduce people into project business management. Yeah. Particularly, my focus is at the moment more on the contractor side, because the gap between what people need to understand and need to know and what they know is, I think, the biggest there. We have, apart from my book, really nothing out there. There's 2-3 books, maybe, nothing there. So that's one thing. Then something on the generic project management, which loses significance in my professional life. It was one of the big things of my last couple of years. I did this for a major aircraft manufacturer, for a production place of them, yeah, Airbus, of course. But at the moment, they are not in a position to buy seminars. The market is too difficult at the moment, and it's not their fault. It's the problem with COVID, of course. People don't travel. The third part is certification, PMP certification, and this has been my bread and butter business for the last 19 years. In February, it will be 20 years. Yeah. So, but I think the growing thing, and the thing that you don't find anywhere else, is project business management, the seminars on project business management, to make project managers more aware of commercial aspects, of legal aspects in their project. It's about this acumen, but it's also about business spirit. I think project managers in this situation often have to develop business spirit. They see themselves as project managers, but they don't see the commercial side and the business side of that. Yeah. By the way, another thing, as you just talked about, networks help invite people. I would like to invite you to an interview as well. And I would like you to come to the Project Business Foundation. My colleagues there don't know it at the moment. It's just spontaneous. I'm a very spontaneous guy. I have the craziest ideas when no one expects them. But I would love to have a talk about cybersecurity in project business, because that's a huge topic. We have interfaces between organizations. Yeah, there may be a customer organization which is very secure and well protected, and a contractor very secure and very well protected. And now you have an interface between them. It's a human interface. Yeah. It's a social interface, but it's also a digital interface. It's also an economical interface. And that's a dangerous point. So what do organizations need to do and to think about? at this interface. There is no one out there to talk about that.
So definitely something I would really love to do. And there's another aspect of project management that I wanted to talk about today. As we're talking to people across the board, and no matter what level you're at in project management, and that is the aspect of project management volunteering, which is actually how Oliver and I met. And a lot of times I've been doing these interviews with people that I've only interacted with in digital world, but Oliver and I met in physical space in the real world because I wanted to volunteer, and I was starting a project management roundtable for English speakers in the area where I was at in Stuttgart, and Oliver was over in Munich, and so we were able to interface as I technically was volunteering underneath the Munich chapter. So I'm going to put a link in here to pmi.org. And Oliver, I would like for you just real quick kind of to discuss what you think somebody can give, what kind of volunteer opportunities there are, things that you've experienced and worked with as a PMI.org volunteer yourself, and also what do people get out of it? Why should people volunteer for this kind of organization?
I think volunteering is another learning opportunity. I was 5 years the president of the PMI Southern Germany chapter. And during the time, we had a name change. It was originally the Munich chapter, then it became the Southern Germany chapter. Of course, we had members in Stuttgart, for instance, and people in Stuttgart don't feel that they live in Munich, but they feel like living in Southern Germany. It's also in Southern Germany. So that's one of the things you learn. It's organizational things, it's change things that in my profession, that I do training, I don't learn this in my profession. So I get some different tasks that I can do, can train my skills there, self-train my skills, work with other great people who are very, very professional. I see them work and how they work. They see how I work. We can exchange certain knowledge and skills and understanding about that. So I think that's the main reason to do it. It's about networking again, but it's also about a learning process. And if I look into the last couple of years, where did I learn most? About project management and about management in general. It was not in my profession as a trainer. It was in my activities as a volunteer for the chapter of PMI first, now for the Project Business Foundation that we, a group of people, small group of people founded for project business management. And I learned so much there. And actually, every day I learn something new. So that's really valuable. And you learn those things that you cannot learn on the job because it's not part of your job, what you can do there. So that's the other recommendation I would give. If you do a volunteering assignment, try to find an assignment which is far enough away from your job so that you learn something which is new for you, but it should somehow be near enough to your job that the things that you learn, that you can apply them somehow, that you can make something out of that.
That's such a good point, Oliver. And I was just reflecting on when I was in Colorado Springs, I took on the role of being the social media coordinator. And being in cybersecurity, I never get to use social media at work. Like we're so like, no, don't use social media because there's so many different vulnerabilities and ways that that there's weaknesses. But when it comes to working in a volunteer organization and you need to market and you need to get the word out about your activities, just like we're using social media right now, it was just phenomenal. And so having an IT background, I was like very comfortable in that kind of role in social media. And now sometimes at work, when we do have to intersect and we're looking at cybersecurity and we're looking at social media, I'm able to look at it from the perspective of, oh yeah, I did a lot of volunteer work. And then of course, as I eventually stood up my own business on the side, I was able to really leverage what I learned as a volunteer. So great points about volunteering and what you learn, and close enough that you can really do it, but not something that you do at work, because then you're not really going to be able to stretch yourself and get those same values out of it.
You have limitations in time and energy, family, maybe, all these things. The dog needs some time.
Exactly.
So there are always limitations, but inside these limitations, it's something where you can gain new experience and new knowledge and skills. And I'm 62. I will be 63 next month, and I think I learn more today, and I learn faster today than in my young years. Yeah. So, and the reason is that I have these means to learn.
And it's probably because you've also learned to listen to your wife.
Don't tell her. She will say Oliver should listen to me much more.
So, Oliver, we have talked about both your books. We've talked about your business. We've talked about volunteering. Is there anything else that you want to discuss before we close out this session today?
What I would like to do is invite everyone to come to the Project Business Foundation.
And what is the name for that Project Business Foundation? I can put the link in.
Project-business.org. Project-business.org.
Okay, perfect. I will put that into our chat. And if you could describe the Project Business Foundation a little bit.
We are young and we are small, so don't compare us with PMI. We are not in competition with PMI or with IPMA or something like that. We are more the people who pick up the breadcrumbs that the others left over and make something out of that. And I think these breadcrumbs are big. I did some research some time ago, and it's roughly 50% of the project managers in customer projects, in project business. It's not a minority. It is, I think, more than 50%. So what we do is to give those people a professional home, an association home. And as I said, there's a second group, which is still a bit more in the background, but it's also there. And that's the people who have to manage complex project supply networks on customer side. That's also a topic that you don't find discussed at IPMA, at PMI, and anywhere else. How do you deal with that? How do you engineer that? But as I said, the first group, the group that has most of our focus at the moment, is rather the contractor side, because there is nothing there for them. Yeah, it's nothing there for them. They need help, and young people are brought into these jobs. They are expected to bring money home with the project, and they have no idea what it really means. And by the way, some people don't even have the spirit to do that. I met people who said, hey, I have nothing to do with commercial things. I have nothing to do with business, legal, and so on. I'm the project manager. I'm just a technical guy. And that's not how you can do a customer project. You have three big objectives. One thing is, of course, to make the customer happy. The second is you will have to look at profitability of the project. You have to bring money home with the project. And the third question is liquidity. When will this money arrive? Will this money arrive before we are running into illiquidity, or after that, maybe, which means we will no more exist when the money comes. It may not come at all, by the way. Yeah? And we are not talking about theory. We are talking about real practice. We are talking about people with their boots in the mud. Yeah. And these people are welcome at the Project Business Foundation. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Oliver. I'd like to remind everybody, Oliver's two books that we discussed today, Situational Project Management, Dynamics of Success and Failures, as well as Project Business Management. Those links are in the chat area. And then I am Amy Hamilton, author of The Project Manager, Life is a Project, and The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals. I'm super happy to announce that The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals audiobook version has cleared the quality assurance program and should be coming on Amazon any day now. Can't wait to get those messages out to you. And just a thought for everyone, the holiday season is quickly approaching. If you're looking for a gift for people that you know who are in project management, what better gift than the gift of learning and the gift of books? So please think about that. Oliver, thank you so much for being on the broadcast today.
Amy, thank you for inviting me. Thank you that I had the honor and the pleasure to be here with you and to see you again, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. And I can't wait to be on your show as well. What a surprise invitation. Super excited. And last thing is I really want to thank Saeed and the team one last time. You give us such a great venue, and hopefully what we're giving you is great broadcasts. To everybody in the community out there, keep asking those tough questions. keep asking me to bring people on board. Super excited, and I'm going to be having more announcements. Once again, we're going to be having Michael Clayton with his numerous books next month in December. We're only going to do one December broadcast because of the holidays, and then in January we'll be starting the 2 programs. One is still going to be focused on project management authors and works out there. The other part on successful projects. Thanks everyone for listening today.